Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Idaho Sports Zone. So we rounded up 4 of the IdahoSports.com old-timers for an hour-long discussion on how they got started and some of the best memories these guys have from their time at IdahoSports.com. So I'm Brandon Hill. I'm the content and social media manager here at IdahoSports.com. And my job tonight is going to be to try and keep these guys on target and family-friendly. So guys, you all ready for this?
Bring it on. I'm ready.
Let's do it.
So let's introduce everyone before we get started. Up first, we have a Scott Burton over there in Jerome. After graduating in 1988, Scott has been a player or coach on 30 state championship teams, including football, baseball, track, and speech. Scott recently sold out and went into administration as the new athletic director and vice principal at Jerome High School. Scott has been a sports anchor on TV. He's been a PA guy for semi-pro football teams and host of a sports radio show. He celebrated his 10th year anniversary as an IdahoSports.com broadcaster this past March. Up next, we have Will Hoenike. Will comes from a rich background in sports broadcasting. You might recognize him from his time covering high school sports on Voices Channel 6, or he might be kind of familiar from his years as the voice of the Idaho Steelheads hockey team. Will now works at the College of Idaho, but still finds time to do some writing and broadcasting here at IdahoSports.com. And next, we have Paul Kingsbury, the owner and managing editor of IdahoSports.com. He directed its growth from just a simple scores and schedules website at the turn of the century to Idaho's leader in online high school sports coverage 20 years later. He grew up and graduated in New Plymouth and has lived in Kuna for about 15 years now. And last up, we have Lorin Jensen. Lorin does a little bit of everything around here as a producer, broadcaster, and even dabbles in corporate sales. He pretty much runs things during state tournament time as well. His day job is commercial satellite sales manager at Big Dog Satellite and Solar. Lorin arrived here in 2007 as a New Plymouth grad looking to bum some free tickets to a state tournament game. That quickly escalated to Lorin becoming the heir apparent, taking over this place if and when Paul Litter retires or has a massive heart attack.
Wow.
So we have a great show planned for you guys tonight, and make sure to comment any questions that you might have for you guys down below. So I think we should get started, and I think we're all kind of due for a little history lesson on how each of you got involved with IdahoSports.com. So I think we should kick it off with the guy who started it all, our fearless leader, Paul Kingsbury.
Wow. He's something. You know, living in New Plymouth and then Kuna, a lot of people would say that guy just likes the smell of cow crap.
We call that the smell of money down here, Paul.
Smell of money. That's right. So, yeah, turn of the century, 99, 2000, somewhere in there. Hobby, nights and weekends, went full-time in 2002. Schedule scores. The internet was brand new back then. And so over time it grew. We added photo galleries back in 02, 03-ish. Started broadcasting in 04, 05. Went through the recession, which was a lot of fun to go through in a business that runs on advertising. And through the help of, guys like Matt Harris, Sven Alskog, and, Lance Taylor, all those guys over the years that come in because they love what we do and they want to be a part of it, and they're great at it. We're to where we're at today, which is 7 o'clock on a Saturday night doing a Facebook Live show. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but that's where we're at now.
And Lorin, you went to high school with Paul. How did you kind of get roped into this whole thing?
Well, I didn't actually go to high school with Paul. See, we talked about the old timers. Well, Brandon, you and I are the young guys here on this show. So Paul went to school with my older brother, Dan. They were on a state championship basketball team together there at New Plymouth. And so I knew him from that, and because they were friends. And yeah, kind of the way I got started was I knew that Paul did Idaho Sports. I mean, when I was in school, right when they started, it was pretty much just data that was available. I mean, the internet was still pretty young. I told my kids that the internet didn't used to exist the other day, and they looked at me like I was stupid. But this always hasn't been available to us. But yeah, I wanted to take my wife to the state tournament, and I knew Paul was doing Idaho Sports, and I figured he could get me in for free. I didn't know that meant that I would be coming and running a broadcast with Jeff Duncan and it just kind of
no free lunch, Lorin. No free lunch.
Yeah, no free lunch. I didn't realize that yet. I was still young and stupid.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how I got started, and it's snowballed from there, and continued to be involved. I've missed a few state tournaments since then, but not too many for basketball, anyways. So, yeah, it's been a fun ride.
And Scott, I don't think we even met until this last basketball state tournament. How did you kind of get roped into IdahoSports.com?
Well, I kind of got started, and gosh, I was actually coaching a basketball team in the state tournament. And we had just finished the state tournament, and I went home, and I was watching the archives on Idaho Sports. And I don't know really how I even learned about Idaho Sports, but I got it. And I'm like, I want to listen to these games. In fact, it was Jeff Duncan and Lorin, I believe, that was calling my game. And I heard one of you say, if you want to do this and you think you could be a broadcaster, and all of a sudden I just lit up, and I'm like, yeah, I got to do this. And so I crafted, and I sat at my table, and I thought long and hard about what I wanted to say and do, and I crafted this email and to Paul, calling him sir, and
it was Mr. Kingsbury. It was Mr. Kingsbury.
Oh, was it?
In your email, yeah.
Yeah, and fun fact, that's the last time I think I ever said that.
He has a much different nickname for me now.
But I wrote this email and said I would be interested in it, and that Paul got me started that spring with doing some baseball games, and from that spring on, I've been doing every state tournament, Friday Night Lights, you name it, been there, done that, and Paul every year sends me that letter just to remind me that I used to be actually very nice. Nice, polite, respectful, professional, exactly. And that's how I got started, and I love it. And it's one other thing really quick is, when I took the administrative job, when I sold out, Brandon, and I took the administrative job at Jerome, one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that my school understood was that I was still going to be able to work for Idaho Sports as a broadcaster during state tournaments, and they were on board, and I'm happy they were, because Idaho Sports is a big part of who I am.
That's awesome. And Will, you're kind of the only person I had heard of before starting IdahoSports.com, because growing up, I was like, oh, Will Hoenike, that sounds so familiar. And yeah, it was just from watching sports broadcasts on Channel 6. How did you come to contact with Paul and get started at Idaho Sports?
Back in the early days, Paul, when he was just a lot of scores and schedules, Channel 6 did the most complete high school sports coverage on a Friday night during football season. So he might call or email or something, and just we'd swap scores, essentially. He'd be missing a couple scores, we'd have a couple, and it just kind of started that way. That was back when he was in the garage in New Plymouth, working in New Plymouth, and so I knew Paul, and we collaborated on a lot of things. He had a lot of great ideas, but I didn't really start, quote unquote, working with Paul until about 2007. When I left to go work with the Steelheads, my schedule freed up a little bit more, and ever since then, I've marveled. Every state basketball tournament I've done has been a collection of 40-point blowouts, and I've enjoyed watching social media where every game that Scott Burton does comes down to the final possession, overtime, double overtime. Meanwhile, I'm the guy who's not mentioning the score because it's 58-6 in the third quarter, and Paul's got guys hitting mid-court shots and girls doing reverse slam dunks. And, I'm just hoping for a game that's not over by the 4-minute mark of the first quarter.
Right.
And I've gone all over the state with Paul to do games. I've driven through towns and gone to towns that, I knew of, but I'd never been to before. And I'm very grateful for all the opportunities he's given me, and I hope there's a lot more.
And speaking of places that you've been, working in the office with Paul for the last sports season, I've heard a lot of snippets of stories about all of you guys traveling all across the state to do games at ungodly hours of the night. And we can start with Will. I guess, what are some of your favorite stories from the road, things that you've seen, favorite memories at IdahoSports.com doing games and working?
Well, one thing that I think, it's one of those things that when you stop and think about it, you're like, well, duh, but maybe you don't really think about it that much in the moment, is there have been a number of times where maybe Paul and I went to, say, Cottonwood to do a Prairie game on a Thursday night, and then we went up to St. Mary's to do a Friday game, and then stopped in Riggins to do a Salmon River game on the way back down to the Boise area on Saturday night, going by old Skookumchuck there. And a lot of hours on the road, and the games are a blast. The games, I remember a game, a playoff game at St. Mary's where we weren't really sure how it was going to work. So they literally rented a flatbed truck, and Paul and I stood on the back of a flatbed truck and called a playoff game between St. Mary's and Melba. And then we hopped in the car and we drove home. So, just a lot of the towns, and a lot of the ADs, the administrators, the coaches, they've done so much to help us.
Absolutely.
Paul, you can talk more about Charlie Shepard up in Riggins, literally building a press box pretty much for Idaho sports. And, he's not the only one. That's not the only school that's done that. But I think about doing games from flatbed trucks. I did the Wilder Potlatch game with Clay Hatfield from the back of a flatbed truck this past fall. Paul and I doing a game in Twin Falls on a scissor lift that wouldn't go up if we were both on it. We had to put it up, and then I had to climb up onto it.
They brought in a ladder so that I could go up on it, and then Will could climb the ladder to get to it. Yeah,
that was good for my ego. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But all kinds of great stories like that are just, there's so much fun and things that you can't, sure, would Scott love to be the voice of the LA Lakers? Would Paul love to be the voice of the Las Vegas Raiders? I'm sure we'd all love that, but man, there are certain things you get in Idaho high school athletics, whether we're talking about Jerome, whether we're talking about Greenleaf, whether we're talking about New Plymouth, it doesn't matter. You just get so many cool experiences that you won't get anywhere else.
Right. And, there's a comment there at the bottom from Cindy, who's actually Brandon's aunt, I believe.
Hey, Cindy.
Cindy and I, we worked together early on. Stuart Vickers, working with the Raleigh Lane tournament for years doing that stuff. And the people you meet going around, I don't even know how many flatbed trucks and scissor lifts and weird places that we've broadcast from just to get the games going. And it's been a lot of fun over the years, and the people really is what makes it fun. You guys, of course, I remember going up to state volleyball. I think it was the last year we did state volleyball. Tyson Johnson was a broadcaster for us. Bear of a guy, 6'8", big beard, passed away a little over a year ago. Funnier than heck, always happy. We're riding up in the van because we took everybody up with us. Heated seats. And I would be sitting there driving in about 15 minutes. I'm roasting because he had reached up and hit the heated seats. He fell asleep on the way home, so I turned on the heated seats. About an hour later, the guy wakes up, he's sweating, and he just starts yelling and screaming and all sorts of stuff. On that same trip, we went to IHOP, and Lucas, who's I think at Channel 7 is a producer now, Tyson said, if you eat that jalapeno, I'll give you all the money in my wallet. So he did. Tyson had no money in his wallet, and Lucas was just dying. The poor waitress felt bad, brought him milk, brought him bread and all this stuff to make him feel better. And things like that as we go through. And I wish I would have written things down in a journal.
Well, how about this one, Paul? Remember this one in Cottonwood, Prairie against Salmon River. It was, I think, the first time we'd ever done a game there. we literally had to run the router up a flagpole to get a signal at the field.
Out of the school, duct taped it to the flagpole, ran it up. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. And one of the first games we did at Oakley was kind of the same thing. Back there was no internet hotspots back then. Right. And so what I would do is I'd go to the school a few days beforehand, find the nearest window and run an Ethernet cable, set up a wireless router, and hoped it reached the press box. So I went to Oakley, and there's the school right there, ran it out a window, parked my car, put the router on top of the car, duct taped it down, and we did the game. And that's how we did pretty much every game. And then as internet became more available, and then there was this cool thing with Wi-Fi, and now we just have hotspots. You can get it on your phone now with a hotspot. So when technology caught up to what we were doing, it made it infinitely easier. But it's also what made the memories, right? When you're on trips with your kids and they're whining, like, shut up, we're making memories. When state basketball, Lorin, you'll remember this. It was probably 2015, 16. Lorin and I, we would get things ready for the next day. There's, Matt would be there, Sven. At the Idaho Center, Lorin and I were getting things ready. And by the time we were done, it was, 3, 4 o'clock. First championship game's around 9:30. And so we're like, you know what, let's just go crash in the car that was outside the Idaho Center. So we did. And so every 15 minutes, I was waking up because Lorin would turn the heater up. And then he'd wake up every 15 minutes because I turned the heater down. So a long night of sleeping in the car, roasting and freezing alternately.
That was the worst idea that we ever have had is, let's not go back to your house. We'll just crash in the car. It was terrible. I mean,
I'll tell you a worse idea, Lorin, is watching repeats of Time Life commercials with Paul.
We did that.
That's worse than any heater on, heater off.
All night long, the same infomercial over and over. That was for a volleyball tournament at Bonneville High School way back in the day.
Yeah, that was a long night, and but like I said, those are memories that you don't want. Like in the moment, it's like, this was terrible. What the heck are we doing? But then later, it's funny, and it's like, oh, we lived through it, and we'll never forget that.
During broadcasts, things happen, and Scott, you've been involved in them. I think all of us have those moments on air where you talk. I know Sven has, if he's watching. Aunt Dixie is popular. So but back, Jeff Duncan, I think, is watching from Texas. Jeff was, I met him in Blackfoot. He was on the radio. So he and I are doing a playoff game, Malad at Holt Arena. And, Jeff's a seasoned broadcaster, and it's a term that isn't used often, but it's used. And, but the way it was used made me, tilt my head like the dog in the RCA logo, where he went, and tonight we've got a very gay Malad team. Well, what he meant was a game Malad team, but the M's ran together and just said, we have a very gay Malad team. And I looked at him because I'd never really heard the phrase anyway, and he looks at me like, what? And off we went. But that was easy 12 years ago.
And that kind of leads to some of the stuff that we do behind the scenes sometimes, and that is every once in a while we'll text each other the word that we want to work into a broadcast.
Yes.
And we've had a lot of fun with that over the years. And our listening audience has no idea what's going on, except they may say that sentence just did not sound right or go well together, but there was a reason for that.
Scott, what was the dairy one we did? And you nailed it.
Oh, do you really want me to say it? It was It was you said to work in butt cheese. Remember that?
Butt cheese, yes.
Butt cheese. Yes. Yeah. And we were at Holt Arena, and asked me to do that, and I'm like, okay, I think I got this. And then so I thought about it for a minute, and we started talking about the United Dairymen as far as being a major underwriter and how much we appreciate them. And then I kind of launched into a little. I'm a big fan of dairy, yogurt, milk, but cheese is my favorite products.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Then I just took off my headset, dropped the mic, and walked out of the room.
Just walked out. We haven't seen him since.
I was done. There's nothing else I could do. And you think back to some of these stories. I remember when we first started. Matter of fact, it was the first time that we had broadcast Boys State basketball, and it was at Bora High School, and we hadn't quite established, kind of where we were going to be, and we got put in the middle of the bleachers with a table about as big as the laptop. And so we're trying to set up a camera. Mike Savage and I are trying to set up a laptop in the crowd. And throughout the entire broadcast, I mean, we had people knocking our camera over. Hey, can you sit down? We're trying to do a broad. People are standing up, and then a couple of guys would walk by and do the whole thing. I mean, we're right in the middle of the stands.
Yeah.
And we swore we were never coming back. And then the next year, I think we got it all logistically figured out. And those were fun. And I think another time that I remember is I was doing 4A state baseball at Bishop Kelly, and I got so sick that I'd go up and I'd call the game, and I'm just dying. And then in between the games at state baseball, you've got a good hour, sometimes hour and a half between games. I would just go down to my pickup and start. I mean, this isn't, 85, 90 degree weather. Start up my pickup, turn on the heater, and just lay there and sweat for an hour and a half, and then just kind of get it together, go back up, call the game, go back down, sweat it out again. And those are the memories that you remember, obviously sometimes more so than the games, that people don't ever get to see us go through and do. Right. It's a lot of fun.
You brought up Jeff and Blackfoot, and during football playoffs for like 3 or 4 years in a row, I would go down and do some games at Holt with like Matt or maybe Lucas or Sven, and then I'd turn around and go back to Blackfoot High School to do a night game on top of their press box during playoff time, which it's always freezing cold in eastern Idaho, winds blowing, and I'm by myself. And I know, play around river. And then Paul paid me half the money that I'd normally get. I don't know what the deal is.
What?
Anyway, but it was freezing. But if you go back and listen to those, I'm sure you can hear me just chattering because I would be shivering trying to call those games. Yeah, and the sniffing. But it's those kind of things. It sucks while you're there, but it's such a good memory and fun time.
Yeah. I remember doing a high school, a 5A football playoff game once where Paul was nice enough to get me the talent. I was in the booth, but my camera guy, Ken Webster, he was up on top of the booth, and it was an absolute deluge from opening kickoff to final gun. I mean, we're talking, I had a hard time seeing the far side of the field. It was raining so hard. And he's out there in the rain the whole time, and I'm nice and toasty warm in the broadcast booth, like, hey, Ken, what's up there? And he's like, yeah, pretty soggy right now, pretty soggy. But I enjoyed it. I was dry. I was good.
Well, down here we see a comment from Brian Hall. He broadcaster for us. Yeah. He did state baseball. I think it was 3A, and he had a foul ball come back and destroy his laptop.
I remember that.
He was still on, but he didn't know he was on, so he kept going, but he was, and yeah, that was crazy. So the one, well, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I remember showing up to a game one time, and I made sure I was going to mention this. The rosters were all wrong, and not that we've never had that happen before, because we all have, but what they had is and there were two teams that I was not familiar with. It was just one of those spur-of-the-moment games. Hey, can you go do this game? Absolutely, very minimal prep time, if any. And you show up, and most of the time, we're trying to learn these names as we go when we're doing these sorts of games. And so I think people that listen to us sometimes notice how we get better because we're starting to learn and memorize numbers. But the rosters had been flip-flopped. So, like, Team A had Team B's numbers and names. Team B had A. And so for the entire first quarter, I'm calling the whole game backwards. And I don't know who is what. And I thought I was right, but then this number didn't match up. And I'm like, well, I guess, we have a problem in the program. This number didn't show up. And so the whole first quarter, I mean, it was an absolute dumpster fire. And then I think somebody had come up to the press box and said, oh, by the way, after the first quarter, so we're like, okay, all right. back on the train we got, and it was great from then on out. And then the Grace trip, Paul, that you and I took. You recall that one?
That was 2011, and you came on in 2010. So this was, this was the first, togetherness you and I had really ever had. And so we're driving. I picked you up on the way through. We're going to Grace, early October. It had already snowed. Neither one of us had been to Grace, and Google Maps wasn't on your phone yet. And so we got lost. I don't know where we ended up. We weren't anywhere near Grace.
You're in the lab, I think.
I can't remember. It was like Phoenix. I can't remember exactly what the town was. But we finally end up in Grace, and they were shoveling the field. They had us up in the press box. It was cold. The game was, if I remember right, it wasn't a great game. It was kind of a blowout, but it was fun. The whole way there, I had, there was also no Sirius XM or anything like that. So I had a thumb drive I could plug into my stereo, and I had MP3s, and I was just burning through playing Name That Tune with 80 songs, and Scott was nailing every one in like the first second and a half. He's got an amazing mind for 80s music. Scary, but amazing.
That's my final Jeopardy category, by the way.
80s music?
Yes.
Yeah, you would win. So but before we move on, I have one memory that I want to finish up with, and it's one that is it was crazy. It was the craziest weekend that we've ever had at Idaho Sports. And so it was the playoffs. Can't remember what year. 2013, I think. And it was semifinal weekend. So it was semifinal and championship weekend. So semifinal weekend, Capitals playing at Coeur d'Alene. And so Troy Oppie and I hop in the car. We drive to Coeur d'Alene, do the game in the snow. It was freezing cold. There was something, the window didn't open enough for the tripod, so I'm holding things. Well, we hopped back in the car, and this is from Kuna to Coeur d'Alene, and it was bad weather, so it was about 7-8 hour drive. Well, I needed to be in Dietrich the next day for a 1 o'clock kickoff, which is 2 hours past Boise. And so we hop in the car. We're just going to drive through the night. We get about a mile outside Plummer, and it's parked cars. And we were there all night long, middle of the night. We tried to get around it, got stuck, came back. Our spot on the highway was still there. It took us, actually, we went through Riggins, and because Salmon River was playing at Dietrich, about 7:30, we finally made it through Riggins. Team had already left. And so it took, actually on the way through, I was going to take Oppie home to Eagle. Didn't have time. I dropped him off at the Middleton exit and said, hey, call your wife. Boom, gone. So then I went to Dietrich, got there, nick of time. In fact, I looked at the archive this morning, and we're literally, welcome everybody, here's the kickoff. And it was with Andrew Ray, a broadcaster we had in Burley. Did the game, drove home. On the way home, I called my wife, Joella, because I'm dead tired. I mean, there was no sleep involved in this story at all. And I'm like, hey, honey, I'm not just dozing off. I'm like blacking out. So, talk to me. And about 10 seconds in, she's like, hey, I got to go. I'll call you back. I'm pretty sure she had to hang up to up my life insurance. Hey, I'm back. So the next weekend, okay, so there was basically about 1,200 miles driven, 35 hours in the car, everything else, no sleep. Next weekend, it's kind of the same thing with championships. And so Matt Harris hops to Salt Lake Express bus and from Idaho Falls comes to Boise. I pick him up at the airport. We come back to Kuna, load everything up. We go to Moscow. We do the 5A championship game, and then we turn around and come back. And this is a Friday. Kickoff at Holt Arena is at noon. And so we come back through, again, not great weather, drive all the way through the night, get to Pocatello about 9 o'clock, eat breakfast at Butterbur's. If you've never been to Butterbur's in Pocatello, go. And then we go straight to Holt, where Lorin was. We do 3 championship games back to back to back. Games are done. I think we got something to eat. And Lorin drove Matt home, and then I drove back to Kuna that night. So we had gone from Kuna to Moscow to Pocatello back to Kuna, again in a span of probably 35 hours, 1,200 plus miles, 4 championship games, 0 sleep. And that's what we did back then. I actually talked to Matt today to kind of get the details correct. And he's like, yeah, we were crazy. We were absolutely nuts back then. But that's the way we got 4 championship games then. The other 2 were in Boise, and I think Vince Trimboli and Josh Byers took care of those at Boise State. But only way we could get those 4 championships was to just drive and not sleep. That was it. We were running on 5-hour energy, and you take the wheel, and we got there, and it worked out. But that's probably the craziest 2 weekends of state football or any state that I can remember.
And we have a comment down from Tim Brennan at a Bishop Kelly. Thanks for what we do. We like seeing those. And speaking of coaches and people that you guys have met across the state, kind of talk about who you've met traveling to all corners of Idaho. Who have you met that kind of make you feel like doing all of this, staying up all night to go to games is worth it? And who have you met across the state that make it feel like this is possible? I guess we'll start with Paul too.
Well, there's a million different people, even though it's Idaho. There's a million people, and it goes from coaches, and I really hesitate, mentioning coaches by name because we're not gonna say them all that we appreciate. But there's the Hasselstroms at Prairie. There's Cameron Anderson at Gooding, and Coach Hobson at Century, and Coach Brennan. We send him a form for previews. It's back and it's filled out right, and those coaches, they help us. They help us help them. We're here to cover the schools, and the coaches and athletic directors that help us. It's helping them in turn, and then you get to the coaches themselves that are awesome. Besides athletic directors, and then you get to parents, and sometimes you get the parent, and sometimes there's Karens out there, as they call them, male and female. Early on with state tournaments, I was at the Idaho Center. We're doing a game, and we still have it, sportsboards.com. It's a message board system, but back then it was on fire all the time. I mean, it was just on fire. And I had a guy come up to me and from the eastern part of the state and lean over the railing at the Idaho Center. I'm going to sue you for all you're worth. And I stood up and emptied my pockets and threw some lint at him and went, there you go. And it basically came down to somebody made a comment about him and his son and not being good at sports, and kept going. And that stuff happens. We went to Tiger Grizz. We used to do a lot with wrestling, and a mom that I met, we were doing the last round for Tiger Grizz, and that's always the heavyweights. And my broadcast partner for wrestling was, I won't say his name, but it sounds like Bill Brown. And he wasn't a fan of the heavyweights. I was. That was like my favorite division. So when we got there, he kind of tuned out. So we're at the heavyweights, and he looks down there. And also, to preface this, sometimes we would joke with each other and say something you shouldn't say on the air, and I'd kind of look, and he turned the mixer down first, right? So we kind of played that joke on each other. And so we're broadcasting the heavyweight division at Tiger Grizz there at Skyline High School, and all of a sudden in my headset I hear, does that say Pokey or Porky? Because Pocatello, they have Pokey across it. And I looked down at the mixer, and it was up. And I'm like, oh, no. And so the round ends. He walks off to go to the bathroom or concession stand. And to my left, I see these two very nice ladies walking very passionately towards me. And are you the one doing the broadcast? Yes, ma'am, I am. And my husband's watching at home, and he said you called our son Porky. No, I didn't. That guy did. It wasn't me. He's new. I apologize. So, it happens. At BSU, we used to broadcast high school games from the bucket over the top level, and it's just a grate at the bottom. And one of our broadcasters, who's actually a TV sports guy in Montana now, spilled his drink, and it just rained down on the fans below. And that stuff happens, but overall, we love working with the people we get to work with, educators, administrators, even the sellouts like Scott that go from coaching to administration. We can't say enough about the coaches and the people we work with that way.
Yeah. And Will, you've done a lot of stuff here in Boise with Channel 6, but you also are very well versed in the 8-man football arena, and especially North Idaho schools. You know a bit about that. What are some of your favorite places to go broadcast, and which places do you just really enjoy going and covering a game?
I always enjoy going to the Kibbe Dome because they take really good care of us. They make sure we're in a good booth. They make sure we have what we need. The internet is good. never really have to worry about anything there. There's the head football coach at St. Mary's, Craig Teft, played college football with my brother. So it was kind of fun figuring that out, that we both knew each other there. And you know, I'm a big fan of the small school ranks, and it's not, you know, I love the big schools too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just as happy going to a Bishop Kelly or Twin Falls game. But man, you go to some of those small schools and you see some of those matchups. Paul and I did a game once where the two quarterbacks going head to head were Jake Bruner at Prairie, who just went on to have an incredible basketball career at the College of Idaho. And the quarterback on the other side of the field was a guy, maybe you've heard his name, Leighton Vander Esch. And those two were playing head to head. And I don't remember the exact final score, but I just remember long play touchdown. You know, it was just it might have been the same game that we had to, you know, duct tape the router to the flagpole and run it up the flagpole. But you know, there are just some amazing athletes. And another one that came up the other day, I did the 1A Division II girls basketball tournament a few years ago when Genesis Prep had a young lady by the name of Bella Murakatete on the team, and 6'5". And I mean, the thing is she wasn't a stationary bicycle. She could move, she could shoot, she could rebound, she could block some shots. I remember at that tournament, I believe it was at the tournament that it came out that Washington State was recruiting her. I don't think she had committed yet, but Washington State and Boise State, they were there watching her play. And I remember some people at the tournament, well, they're only recruiting her because she's 6'5". They're only recruiting her this, they're only recruiting her that. Well, the other day, in preparation for this, she wound up committing to Washington State and accepting an opportunity to go play there as a true freshman. This girl who's originally from Rwanda and played 1A Division II high school basketball in Idaho started 20 games as a true freshman in the Pac-12. So, I mean, whether it's 1A, whether it's 5A, kids can play. Athletes are good. Coaches can coach. The communities are great, and I love getting to go around to all the different places.
Yeah. And Scott and Lauren, you guys are kind of our East Idaho representatives here tonight. What's it like, you know, covering those games over in the East? What are some of your favorite people to meet over there and places to cover games? I guess Scott, I'll start with you.
Well, being from the Magic Valley area, one of the favorite places that I went to was Dietrich. Love the smaller schools, you know, and I grew up in a 4A school, and that's kind of, you know, our Magic Valley game of the week has been kind of back and forth between big and small. But the state tournaments I cover are generally in the 4As. That's just what I'm familiar with for the most part. But I remember going to Dietrich for the very first time, and the Eagles Nest got wind that we were coming. Oh, yeah, oh my word. And so we heard that they wanted us to stop in, and you know, I don't know what they were expecting. If they were expecting this, you know, me to walk in with this giant entourage and, you know, fur coats and sunglasses, and it's like, where's the chicken fried steak? And you know, and I didn't know what they were expecting, but whatever they were expecting, they were ready for us. And so we walked in, and there were just two of us, me and my color commentator and / cameraman. And so we walk in, and we kind of identified ourselves, and they're basically like, we got a table for you right here. And so they took us right on over, sat us down, and fed us the biggest, anything we wanted, we got. And they bought it all for us. They treated us to dinner. They were attentive. I mean, the chicken fried steak was massive.
Yeah.
So, you know, not to be rude, we finished it. And
wow.
And so we're like looking at our watches, trying to finish this chicken fried steak. Well, we either are not going to make the game, or we're going to like die of a heart attack right here. But something is about to happen, but we are going to finish this. And so we did, and we went to the game in Dietrich, and then it was more of the same. You know, we get up there, here's a Mountain Dew, here's a water. You guys need some popcorn. You need this and that. And I mean, it was red carpet treatment, and we are just dying because we're so full. And if you ever tried to broadcast when you have a full belly, it is almost impossible sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we felt. But I tell you what, the first time we went to Dietrich was truly it was something special. We loved going back there.
Yeah.
You know,
And Lorin, I don't know if we mentioned this at the top of the show, but you actually are a ref too when you're not busy with your 6 other jobs and your family. Any memories of interacting with some maybe some vocal fans or some nice fans as well?
In what capacity? Idaho Sports or as a ref?
Either, whichever one you want to talk about.
How about Alex dad? Lauren?
Yeah, Alec Pope, who works with Idaho Sports too over in Eastern Idaho. His dad, Ryan Pope, the head coach for the South Fremont Cougars. I'm sure Coach Pope remembers this. Hopefully he doesn't, but yeah, the first time and only time that I've refereed a game for Coach Pope, things progressed, and it was with Snake River. South Fremont was playing Snake River, and Snake River's head coach, he can be boisterous, I think is the right word, and Coach Pope can do that as well. And they kind of went back and forth, and there were multiple technical fouls on coaches and teams, and I actually threw out Alex's dad late in the fourth quarter as they were losing. He wasn't thrilled about it. I wasn't either at the time, but I talked to Alec when I started working with him just last year. Was it last year or maybe the year before? I asked him if he remembered that, and Alec's like, yeah, I do remember that. Oh my gosh. And we talked about it a little bit, and I've had some good interactions with Coach Pope since then, and it's just funny the kind of things that happen like that. And then, as a ref, you have those types of interactions with players and coaches, and good interactions with fans too, and parents that come and thank you for doing a good job. And sometimes they don't think you did a very good job, but it's kind of the same thing as a broadcaster. I've had parents come up to me just thanking me because their son or daughter, their grandparents are watching and they can't come to the games, or they live a long ways away, and they're just so grateful for what we do. And recently, I've had a few parents say, well, how much is it? And it's like, well, actually, we are actually doing this game for free currently. And they're like, oh, really? And so, even more excited in that scenario. But it's just a lot of great places in Eastern Idaho, whether it's at Madison or Shelley over the years, down in Snake River. We've been to Firth and Ashton, and Paul, they've been out into Arco, and as a ref, getting to go to those small schools has just been a blast. You talk about Leadore and Chalice, just way the heck out there in the middle of nowhere. And they, like Scott said, those people just love the fact that you're there, and they're just so grateful for it. And that's been a lot of fun, both as a broadcaster and as a ref.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. And I hope we actually get to see some of these competitions come back this fall. I know there's been a lot going on this past spring about COVID-19, sports being shut down, unfortunately. A lot of athletes losing the chance to compete in their final season. When it comes to the fall, though, there's still a lot of question marks on what's going to happen. The IHSAA is going to plan to release some fall guidelines in early June. But Scott, from an athletic director's perspective, what do you see going on right now? What are schools doing to do their part to kind of A, fight the virus, but also B, make sure that the kids have an opportunity to play this fall?
It is such an interesting question, because we don't know what's going to happen, and so, when this thing kind of hit us and we went through this spring, essentially, and I don't know what the right word is, but, cheating our seniors of a chance to graduate normally, to play their sports, to be robbed of a season. And, and some of our retiring teachers never got closure. Retiring coaches never got closure. It was just bizarre. And as we move forward, we are trying to open up our facilities this summer to get our teams back in there. But boy, there is a laundry list of things that they've got to do. Right now, there is absolutely no competition. Everything is going to be individual skill development with extraordinary sanitizing protocols put in place. The SIC has adopted, some guidelines, and we kind of followed and kind of corroborated a little bit with them and adopting a lot of the same stuff. But moving forward in the fall with this ever-changing landscape, you don't know what's going to be like next week.
Yeah.
Multiple discussions have happened about what is going to happen to our fall sports. I think we're going to have them. I mean, and I think we're going to be back. I think we're going to be stronger than ever. And I think that, at some point, we're going to have to realize that we're doing everything we can. But one thing we cannot do is make the cure worse than the problem. And we're in that balancing act right now to where we're flirting with it if we haven't crossed that line already. And if we've learned anything from what we've gone through, we cannot afford to shut down things anymore. And I think everybody wants to stay open. And so we've learned really quickly that, restaurants drive the economy and schools drive the community. And we have got to do everything we can to keep them open. So what we're really focusing on is trying to get our coaches educated that the big picture here is really what matters. What you do in the summer, it isn't going to determine whether or not you win a state title, but it may or may not determine whether or not you have a season, and so much of what we're doing is perception in a way, because we have to do something. And so whether that's sanitizing stations in every corner of the gym and wiping down basketballs and playing, catch only and with the same partner, same workout partner. I mean, that's what we're doing right now. And all of it is just preventative measures so we don't have to worry about this and go through what we went through in the spring again.
Yeah, and I like to take the attitude of, glass half full on this.
Of course, yes.
I think we're seeing, we had a comment on we posted something about we were doing the show a week and a half ago, and one of the comments on one of the posts was, it's sad that sports aren't coming back this fall, paraphrasing. And what? Really? Where did you hear this? And I don't think that's true. I think that the trajectory we're on, that we've been on for weeks, is only going to keep going further we get into the summer, the more we do things. And what I don't want to see is policies put in place or reactions and whatnot that are more focused on liability and political correctness than actual, science or doing what's best for the people. And I think that we've seen a lot of that. I think that there's a lot of free will that needs to be involved here where, if you don't want to go to that game, don't go. It's pretty simple. If you'd like to stay home, stay home. And that's perfectly fine. But I think on June 3rd, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, the IHSA has a board meeting, and they're going to be forming a committee or talking about the committee they formed that's going to be developing these procedures, I guess. And so in a month, somewhere in there, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I think we'll have a better idea of what we're going to look at once we get probably past the 4th of July weekend. And maybe we come back. This is the debut show of Idaho Sports Zone. It's kind of the introduction to what we would like to do with it. And, when we do it again, maybe it's more of a, the status of COVID in sports in Idaho type show where we kind of focused on more contemporary topics as we go along. The Washington State Association has formed committees to seed state tournaments. Maybe we come back and have a talk with that, bring people in on this. So, with this, if people are at home going, well, this was kind of boring. Well, this was just the intro. This wasn't about you. This was all about us having fun because we haven't seen each other for weeks and months. So you just enjoyed us hanging out, basically, is what this was. But so, looking forward, expect more out of Sports Zone stuff. But maybe in the next one, we'll have a little more information on the direction we're heading. Scott, you especially as, the athletic director in the know, so to speak, of what's going on. Maybe when we talk to Mike Federico at the IHSA and have him on and answer some questions and explain things. Lots of stuff we can do. And it's kind of a wait and see thing. But I think overall, I really have a positive attitude about this, that we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. There's going to be sports this fall. There's going to be soccer. There's going to be football. There's going to be volleyball and cross country. There's going to be a school year. It's going to take a little bit of time to get back to normal, I think, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Paul, it's funny. I was just thinking about this as you were talking. We have top center, we have the admin, Scott Burton. Lower left, we have the referee in Lorin Jensen. And I actually helped coach baseball out at Parma, and talking about the COVID thing. And I'm optimistic that we're going to have sports in some form this fall, just like you guys. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the frustration that I have for all of the graduating seniors of the spring sports, the golfers, the tennis players, in particular to Parma. If there are any 3A fans, they know that Parma baseball for a long time was not very good. And this outgoing senior class that we had this year, Stetson Buse, Kyle Powers, Danny Camacho, Lane Murdoch, you just go up and down the list. These were kids that were as freshmen, they were losing games routinely, by 15 plus runs. And here we were as seniors, we were in position to compete for a district title. And coming out of the SRV, where you have Homedale, you have Fruitland, you have Weiser, you have Payette. I mean, there were no cakewalks, but we felt really good about our chance to let those kids finish on a high note. And it was really disappointing that this happened. It was nobody's fault, but it was really disappointing that those kids did not get the chance to finish what they started. And we just hope that going forward, coaches and kids are given that, they have that opportunity, that circumstances allow us to finish what we begin.
Agreed.
Hey, just want to remind everyone to drop your questions down in the comments below. We're going to be in just a second moving on to the Q&A portion of the show, where we're going to be fielding anything that you want to know about IdahoSports.com or athletics.
Hey, Gary, thank you very much. And Brian, we have freshman volleyball open if you're interested.
Brian, one for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, when we all came on, the five of us came on about 6 o'clock to kind of fine tune things, and I saw Scott and went, that's kind of the master. How is it? Masterpiece Theater.
Masterpiece Theater, yeah.
Theater
Yes,
backdrop.
Masterpiece Theater.
All I have as my backdrop is me and Scott back here, and Lauren's over here. You can't see him, but yeah, it's
I have a lamp.
But Gary's on. Gary was actually our very first broadcaster at Idaho Sports, still going strong. He was my teacher in high school at New Plymouth. I can't get away with the broadcast with Gary and not say that he kicked me out of chemistry and physics, not just for the day, kicked me out. But then he made me his TA, and it was a cakewalk after that. So I thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary, for that. It's fantastic.
Just talking about Mr. Jones, I'm going to say, just because I'm quite a bit younger than him. He was my teacher too at New Plymouth. And Gary, he coached a state championship baseball team at New Plymouth, with some great,
Never mentioned that. What?
Yeah, he doesn't ever mention it. He's so humble.
It never comes up. It's weird.
That's the first I'm hearing.
But if I can just imagine what he was feeling as a teacher and as a past baseball coach, loves baseball, how he was feeling for those students and those athletes this spring, as all those guys weren't able to play baseball, the softball players weren't able to play, and so a real tough thing for everybody, like you're talking about with COVID. And I'm kind of the same opinion as all of you guys. We're going to have sports in the fall. Things are going to go again, and we've got referee clinics that we're doing as basketball officials this summer. I've seen summer softball leagues are going. Things are going to go, and they're going to be there in the fall, and so I'm pretty optimistic about that as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now we can kind of transition to the Q&A portion of the show. Remember, if you have any questions all about athletics in Idaho, what we do here at IdahoSports.com, anything, drop it down in those comments, and we'll be able to pull it up. And first, it's from our very own Gary Jones, kind of bridging the gap here and talking about a shot clock in Idaho. Do you think it's necessary, and do you think that it'll actually happen in our lifetime? And Paul, we can start with you.
I think that's a whole other show. It really is. I mean, there's so many pros and cons with that, of cost, because If we do it, everybody's got to do it. And that means if you can afford it or not. Can they raise funds? Sure. Are budgets being cut? Absolutely they are. So a lot of things. On the other hand, it gets kids ready for college. There's a lot of arguments that way. I think there's 8 states in the country that have a shot clock. That's it. If the IHSA would lose their vote on the rules committee if they did it, because it's not, I don't know if the word sanctioned, but by the NFHS. So there's pros, there's cons, and I think it'd be a really fun topic to maybe have for an Idaho Sports Zone show coming up. Maybe when we get a little bit closer to basketball. I mean, it comes up every single year. And my personal feeling on it is no. I don't think we need it. And one's cost, of course, installing and having somebody run it. The second part is how often would we use it? It's high school basketball. How often does any team play offense for 35 seconds anyway? So basically you're looking to have that expense for maybe the final minute or two of a basketball game when people stall. For the most part, in general, that happens. And so it would all come down to that, where, just play defense, there's strategy involved. So I can see both sides. Personally, I guess I don't care either way. I'm not staunchly for or against, but I definitely lean on the opposite side because, one, you rarely see possessions last that long anyway, and just the expense of the schools.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the ultimate ace card there, Paul, is we can talk all we want about the pros and cons from a basketball standpoint, but Mountain View is going to have to do it, just like Twin Falls is going to have to do it, just like Hanson's going to have to do it, just like Chalice is going to have to do it. And who's footing the bill for it? And right, wrong, or indifferent, that money's got to come from somewhere. Nobody's just giving the technology to these school districts.
Right. And like I said, money can be raised. Whenever there's if you really need it, the money's there somewhere from boosters, and you can't say enough about the boosters and businesses and parents at these schools to make things happen. And there's a way, but every school, there's not always that way to do it. And so I don't know. I think if you're mandated to do it, yeah, you do it. But if it's a matter of should we, yeah, I guess I don't agree with it wholeheartedly. Sam actually has an interesting question. Would the IHSA buy shot clocks for all the schools, or would school districts pay for it and install it? No and yes. It's kind of the short answer there. I just that's not what they do. They're not going to go and buy shot clocks for every school. I guess that's the short answer there. And yeah, the school districts would have to pay for it. I guess that's the
from a perspective. What's your take on the shot clocks?
Not having. I've never worked a game that's not true. When I was at BYU Idaho, we worked college rules with their competitive interscholastic stuff, their competitive sports teams, and we worked with a shot clock. And honestly, it didn't come into that much of a factor. Like Paul said, most of the time. And if you think back on any of our playing days as well, man, I don't know if we ever went 35 seconds without putting a shot. I know if I ever touched the ball within 35 seconds, we didn't have to worry about the shot clock. I was throwing it up. So
you might not touch the ball again, so you were getting that shot.
That's right. So
I was never actually on the court for 30 seconds, so it didn't matter to me.
I think it would be fun to have it and to see what it would do, but is it worth the experiment? I don't know. It would change a lot of things, and is it official? It's one more thing as an official you have to worry about. Now we've gone to a 3-man crew recently, and so, but not all regular season associations. Not all associations have gone to 3-man crews for all games during the regular season. It's just been state tournament. In the 6th district, we've done the majority of the 2A and up games with 3-man crews. And so you have an extra person to kind of have that in back of mind if you need it there. With a 2-man crew and a shot clock, it'd just be whoever's running the shot clock would have to be really good, because as an official, you're only going to worry about it when it goes off, pretty much.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, I agree with that. And Scott, you're an athletic director, so cost is now pushed to the forefront of your mind about raising revenue for your sports programs. I mean, do you guys have an extra $3 or $4 grand laying around to buy and install that thing?
Absolutely not. And I think that's where the argument begins and ends is the cost of it all. But let's just pretend for a second that the cost doesn't matter. Does the game need it? And I'm not so sure it does. But what would be kind of cool is if there were maybe some summer tournaments that had it. You could have the shot clock tournament over the summer, and then experiment with what it's like to play with the shot clock. I mean, if everybody's so desperate to have it, well, then let's create a couple of tournaments in the summer where it's maybe not the perfect system, but yeah, we've got a shot clock going on, and maybe have some fun that way. But the cost is really what's going to drive this thing, and that's why it's not going to work.
And that's a great idea, Scott. Just like we did with 3-man officiating, we started doing it in summer stuff. Schools started requesting it for non-conference games, and it just grew from there because they liked it. Well, you can buy pretty inexpensive portable shot clocks that can sit on the floor on either end and have somebody run it for a summer tournament. See how it goes. See if it catches, and if it is something that people and coaches and players like, and then determine whether the cost is worth it.
Yeah, and if you generate enough support, then you know what? Maybe the ball gets rolling and you start having discussions. But I just don't think you can just blanket, hey, we're having a shot clock. Let's work it out. Like Jay's saying here in the comment box, work out the kinks if it's something that we feel the game needs. And I know that everybody's going to come back and argue and say, yeah, it's boring and stalling. And I remember back in the day, Ben Allen, legendary coach, was my high school coach, pulled it out, the ball out, and was stalling and won the game 10-8 over a team that should have beaten him by 20. But that begs the question, that team that scored 8 points, play better defense and go steal the ball. Go double team. Create turnovers. And so you're going to get these arguments on both sides of it. And if the arguments equal each other out, then the trump card is going to be the cost.
And here's something that I always, Gary mentioned something, and I'll put his response up here really quick, because it's the go-to for a lot of people when it comes to shot clocks in Idaho. And actually, Mike mentioned it with Jim Pankratz and the shot clock. I was a little backstory on this game. This was the girls' championship game, and it was Boise Bora. And this was before we were webcasting, so it was early 2000s. But what we did do was something brand new to the internet, and it was basically what you'd call instant chat, one way. And so Scott Mosgrip developed this thing where on the sidelines, I could type in play-by-play, hit enter, and it would come up on the user's screen. And so we pre-programmed some things in there like, 3-point shot by, and then I'd type in the name. And so that's what I was doing for that state tournament. Well, this game starts, and I can't remember exactly how it happened, but essentially team 1 goes down and scores. Team 2 comes across half court, holds the ball. And then they pass screen away. So I'm typing pass screen away, click, pass screen away, click. And after, literally minutes and quarters of this, this sucks, enter. This is terrible, enter. People are booing in the stands. I get it. However, if your argument goes back 20 years to find your example, maybe it's not the best thing. I mean, if you're looking at multiple examples every single year, I think you can step up and go, yeah, we need this. But to go back and go, yeah, this happened, 19 years ago, we need to fix something now, maybe not.
That Boise team, that team was loaded. And Bora, you think about it strategically, you mentioned Jim Pankratz. That's what he had to do to win that game. Like it, love it, hate it, whatever. But you're talking about Cassidy Blaine, Brennan Erickson, Casey Monteith. You can go down that list. I think there were 5 or 6 girls off that Boise team that went on to play college athletics at a Division I level. And even nowadays, that's uncommon. Right. So Pankratz, I believe they'd played 3 times during the season, and every one of them, Boise had won by 20 plus. So he just kind of did what he had to do, and he took the heat. He took a lot of heat for that. But that trophy doesn't say stalled on it. The banner doesn't say that on there.
Yep, it comes down to strategy, and Jason here has 1979 Coeur d'Alene 23 average, great, exciting game, no shot clock needed. But like I said, we can do a shot clock whole show. A couple more questions, and then we'll head out. One was back up here with Jeff Duncan. He's in Texas, so forgive him. But does Idaho play 6-man yet? No. They experimented a year or two. Lorin, I think it was over in Eastern Idaho, I believe, with the Montana team. Was that Ledor?
They did it up north too. Mullen did it one year where they played a JV schedule because Mullen only had 6 or 7 kids, so they played like Kootenai. All the other schools in the North Star played it, or the D2 White Pine played it as a JV game. So whether it was Deary or Kootenai or whoever, but Mullen only had enough kids for a 6-man team, and that's what Stetson Spooner, the AD up there, that's the route he went to give his kids an opportunity to play. And last year they went to the 8-man playoffs, so he's got something going there.
Right.
And in Eastern Idaho, Ledor did do that. They went in and played some Montana schools. They were kind of part of, I guess they got a waiver of some sort, but they went in and they were playing with some Montana schools in a 6-man league. And this has been a few years ago. But it's, I just don't know that there's enough schools, and it might get to that point in Idaho to play that, to have a 6-man league. And they'd have to be traveling all over the state because, like Will mentioned, you've got those teams up north, but then you've got some of those small ones in the east and in the south. And, some of the Montana schools, there's a lot of little schools in Montana. And I think that's one reason why they have that. And, of course, Texas is huge, and so they've got a lot of little schools too. But I just don't know if it would work.
All right, let's do one more. And this is one that could be a whole show unto itself. And we might actually do that when we get closer to football coming, when the football previews come out. But Jacob Zarpentine, he actually has broadcast and produced for us here at Idaho Sports. You probably worked with Lorin once or twice. Conference that I coach in the Mountain Rivers Conference over in Eastern Idaho. 3 teams, usually all the teams are ranked in the top 8 or top 12. Any ideas on new playoff formats for all sports on how to get the best teams there but keep representation amongst all districts? Will, what do you say to Jacob?
I think what the 1A Division I is doing, and I know a couple other. I'm not a proponent of let's just put everybody in, and you have a classification with maybe 25 schools, and 18 of them make the playoffs. I'm not a big fan of that, but I know 1A Division I, what they're trying this year is 12. There are 4 teams, 4 division winners that automatically get a bye into the I guess it'd be quarterfinals, and then 5 through 12 seeds, 5 through 12. They all play that week earlier, akin to 4A or whatever that have done kind of some of those expanded brackets. But you're not over expanding it, where all of a sudden you have a 1-7 team playing in the state playoffs. Because I'm not a big proponent of the participation ribbon, if you will. I want teams to have to earn their way in, but to Jacob's point, it's really hard to be a 6-3 team that finishes 3rd place in your district, and your district only gets 2. So the 6-3 team sits home, while a 3-6 team from a different district, just because of representation, winds up getting a berth. That's a tough pill to swallow, and I totally get that.
Yep.
And you see the comment up here by Sven Alstog about the 3A, which that Mountain Rivers Conference. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's South Fremont, Sugar Salem, and
Teton.
That's correct. And then, of course, down in the south, you got Snake River, Marsh Valley, and who am I missing?
American Falls.
So, combining those two, American Falls, are they 3A or 2?
Aberdeen's 2A, American Falls is 3.
That's right. So I think that's a good option, because he's right. That Mountain Rivers Conference, I mean, Sugar, of course, has been a powerhouse in there, but Teton's been nipping at the heels. They've been done really well over the last couple of years, and South Fremont's always right there. You have those three great teams, and with great records that would, if any of those other teams were in different conferences, they'd probably be able to make the playoffs. And so I think combining that district would be a good idea as well. But I don't know if, that the fifth district, they may not want to go for that. And I'm sure that's been the tough part. They don't want to combine, and maybe the sixth district doesn't want to combine either. They're happy with the way it is. I don't know.
Okay, I said that was the last one, but let's make this one because Tim Brennan asked it, and I'm not gonna cut him off.
You don't say no to Tim Brennan.
Not going to happen. So will the numbers of athletes in the fall increase because of the situation? Many of the kids didn't get a spring season. Coach Brennan thinks that numbers will increase. Interesting question. I thought that's a great question, guys. Scott, let's start with you on that one.
You know what? I think it's a really interesting question, but it also has a couple of different layers to it. When you look at what happened in the fall, and then when you look at what happened not just to our kids, but what happened to our society in general, we are a country that really is driven on sports. And, and I don't ever want to say that there's a good, from the sports perspective, can you imagine if football gets canceled, the uproar that is going to happen, whether it's high school sports or high school football, college football, pro football? Can you imagine our world and how that's going to be? From a societal standpoint, we are itching for this because, football more so than any other kind of is the glue that kind of holds everything together in the fall. I think these kids are itching for it, but I also think what plays into it is I don't think our kids are as, I don't know, afraid of the consequences per se, because this pandemic is not directly affecting them. And so I think, and so I think there's a different mindset there when you get with our kids, versus our parents and our grandparents. They've got a completely different vision of this. But yeah, I kind of agree with Coach Brennan. I think kids are going to be itching to play.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, and I think Will was probably about to do it too. Is we also live in a society that with helicopter parents, and
yes,
is mom and our mom and dad going to be afraid of sending Johnny out to football practice because he might get the COVID? Susie to volleyball practice. You know what? We're just going to keep the kids home. I think some areas of the state are different in that regard than others. I can see that coming into play as well with parents' decisions to let kids play.
I might be overthinking this a little bit, Paul, and I apologize, Coach Brennan, if I'm overthinking this too, but another layer, Scott talks about layers. I think there's a layer, especially tying in what Paul just said, indoor sports versus outdoor sports. Football, cross country, soccer. I can see those sports booming a little bit participation-wise because not only are the kids going to want to get outside, their parents are going to want them to get outside. Volleyball, I don't know, because I think, Paul, that's where we come into the helicopter parent issue. Wrestling, and then you start getting into the winter sports, which are all inside. Right. That's just another layer. That's just another layer to the question, Scott, like you talked about.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think it's gonna come down to what does your community feel about all of this, because there's a different attitude in District 3 in Boise versus District 4 down here in the Magic Valley. It is a whole different ballgame, and we're approaching things a little bit differently than different parts of the state are. So I think it is going to come down to locale.
All right. I think we're done.
From me and Paul's perspective, we sure hope that sports are back in the fall because this is our full-time job and we'd love to have something to cover. But
it does make it tough. Brandon, you've actually done a really great job between March and now of coming up with things to do. Those at first we had the mascot bracket. Then we went to, softball and baseball and, maybe we do a fall sports best team for football and maybe we get closer. So, you've done a great job of keeping content up that Otherwise we kind of sit back and go, and I think all sports media, at the States, we've got Mike Licklama, writing about stuff that has nothing to do with sports because nothing going on. So it's tough, but I think, like, again, I'm not going to harp on it. We're going to be fine. We're, football previews, we're going to be kicking those out mid-August. It's going to happen. Brandon's already making assignments now. We're good. We're going to start entering in fall schedules the next couple of weeks. We're planning on it. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think I can speak for all of you guys. We're just so excited to get back in the swing of things. And once August comes around, it's going to be a top tier kind of situation where we're going to be full steam ahead, covering football, volleyball, soccer, all fall sports all across the state. So if you guys have anything else, speak now or forever hold your peace. But
what? What's that?
Let's do this again sometime.
Say again.
We might be doing this pretty soon. We don't have like a firm schedule worked out or anything, but hopefully that we can put this out, every once in a while, every couple of weeks, and connect with all of you guys virtually and talk some Idaho high school sports.
Now, we do want to. This is what's called a teaser, kids. We got a big announcement coming up later this summer, so follow us on everywhere you can and kind of gear up because we're doing something a little different coming up, and we'll make that announcement in the next few weeks.
Yes. All right, so I think that's going to do it for this show, this debut episode of the Idaho Sports Zone. Thank everyone so much for tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. We really appreciate it. You guys are the ones that make what we do possible, and if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to bring this awesome content and highlight all these awesome athletes all across the state. Like Paul said, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Idaho Sports. A lot of exciting stuff coming. And like we mentioned, football previews coming online, IdahoSports.com this August. So stay tuned for that. So for Paul, Scott, Lauren, and Will, I'm Brandon Hill. And I think it's time that these old timers get to bed. So good night, everybody.